All right. All right. Good afternoon. Good evening, everyone. The City of Tigard Budget Committee is now reconvened and will hold a joint session in reviewing the City of Tigard budget and the Town Center Development Agency. Just a friendly reminder before we go into roll call to please remember to turn on your mic when speaking and mute your mic after you have finished. And just because we have public comment right after this, there are a couple other housekeeping items I'd like to go through before we officially call roll. First is, as last time, I may go around and ask each of you any questions or comments prior to concluding each section of the agenda. Our team will be capturing all of our comments, questions, and requests for follow-up information if necessary. Of course, we have another meeting on May 8th where we can go over any questions or comments that arise today. And public comment has been scheduled for 6:05 p.m., which is a few minutes from now. So please make sure that you have signed in to be called upon if you're giving in-person testimony. And for those joining via webcast, the phone number to call for public comment is 503-966-4101. Again, that's 503-966-4101. Please keep your comments to 3 minutes. With that said, tonight's goal is to continue discussion of the proposed budget for the City of Tigard for fiscal year 2023-2024 and to hear the Town Center Development Agency's proposed budget for fiscal year 2023-2024. Without further ado, let's get started by asking Committee Secretary Leah Voigt to conduct our roll call.
Thank you so much. So we will start with you. Chair Schlack.
Present.
Clarissa Benfield. Timothy Cadman.
Here.
Kelly Pemmin.
Here.
I'm Leah Voigt, and I am here. Jim Knowlton. Yeah, he's here. Perfect. Mayor Lube.
Here.
Counselor Hu? Here. Counselor Shaw?
Here.
Counselor Singh?
Here.
Counselor Wolf? Here. Youth Counselor Nog. That concludes roll call. Thank you.
Thank you. Prior to this meeting, copies of the summary minutes from the April 22nd meeting have been provided to you all. Has everyone had a chance to review the meeting minutes? Are there any changes or additions to the summary minutes from the April 22nd meeting? If there are no additions or changes, is there a motion to approve the summary minutes as written? Tim Cadman?
I'll move to approve the summary minutes.
Thank you. Is there a second? Kelly Pemmin seconds. All right. I will be... Do I take the roll call vote for this? Yeah. All right. I will be taking a roll call vote for approving the summary meeting minutes as written. If you are in favor, please say yes. If opposed, please say no. All right. Going down the list, I'm a yes vote. Tim Cadman?
Yes.
Kelly Pemmin?
Yes.
Leah Voigt?
Yes.
Does Jim vote if, no? Okay, no. Mayor Lube?
Yes.
Counselor Hu?
Yes.
Counselor Shaw?
Yes.
Counselor Singh?
Yes.
Counselor Wolf?
Yes.
All right, the meeting minutes for April 22nd are unanimously approved. All right, the next item on our agenda is public comment. If you wish to call in to provide testimony, please call 503-966-4101 to join the queue. Again, that number is 503-966-4101. Please state your name for the record and speak directly into the phone and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Kalina Plath with the Finance Department has collected the written testimony that has come to the city and has provided all the Budget Committee members with a copy. If you don't have a copy, please let us know and we'll get you a copy. And Kalina will be providing a summary of those comments. I hand it over to you.
Thank you. The attachment was the economic and community impact of the second annual Tigard Music Fest. So you guys should both have that double page printout, and then I'll read the summary of what they sent. Thank you for consideration for approving community funds for the second annual Tigard Music Festival. This event is a free community event, making it equitable for all and inclusive in every aspect, including music genres and performances and vendors of all ethnicities, backgrounds, and who sell a variety of products. The Music Fest is a walkable, bikeable event, making use of the city's trail systems and supports Tigard initiative of walkable and bikeable city, as these lots will be accessible to festival attendees. Last year, the festival brought in 7,000 attendees downtown, and this year they estimate 10,000 plus. It will bring a tremendous economic impact and awareness to downtown Tigard. Many businesses said they saw the best sales since opening, as well as new customers who've never been to their businesses prior. A request for $20,000, which is a fraction of the overall cost to put on this free event of this size, was submitted. There will be 3 stages, 21 performances, and triple the vendors compared to last year over the 3-day festival. The attached document gives more details as to the Budget Committee reconsidering and approving their proposal for $20,000 for the second annual music festival. The estimated city fees create a deficit, while the economic impact to the local businesses increase revenue and elevate their levels. Mutual success helps community development. Thank you, Florian Requeno. And then you have the full one there. And that is the only written comment we received for this week.
All right. Thank you so much. Has anyone signed up to speak in person? I can. Cool. Thank you. There are 3 people signed up for now, maybe more that come in during this period. The first person on my list is Liz Newton, who would like to make public comment on the community navigator position.
Still weird being on this side. My name's Liz Newton, 12300 Southwest 106th Drive, and I'm here to speak again briefly about the community navigator position. First of all, I wanted to acknowledge what a hard decision you all have. There's a lot of community priorities, way too many to fund, so I appreciate the position you're in. The second thing I wanted to do is give a shout out to all the team members that work here. We have a really dedicated group of professionals, many of whom I had the privilege of working with, and I know they work hard every day to make Tigard the best community it can be. But doing community outreach individually with groups isn't their full-time job. They all have other things they're doing. They're police officers or meter readers or utility billing people or court clerks or economic development managers. They have a lot of other responsibilities. So they're just not in a position to do the extensive outreach and connection that the community navigator position is designed to do. I don't know how many of you listen to Talking Tigard. I'm a huge fan. I listened to a recent interview with our new Committee for Community Engagement chair, and her daytime job is working with Stanford University in their HR department on DEI. She's a DEI manager there. She also talked about the benefits of being on the CCE, and one of the benefits caught my ear. She said, working regularly with the team staff liaison and the communication manager, that regular contact with them gave her, the word she used was the courage to contact them if her neighbors or she had a question or an issue with the city of Tigard. So it's that regular contact that makes her comfortable to contact somebody at the city that she knows. So that, I guess, was a good example to me of what the intent of the community navigator position is. Somebody who can be a regular point of contact for folks who, especially in our BIPOC community, who don't really know how to navigate city processes and city, they just don't know how to get through all that stuff. It's great that we do events and that kind of thing, but I think we really need to think about, after COVID and everybody being so separated, a position that would enhance folks' ability to get more connected to us. So thanks for your consideration.
Thank you for your testimony and your interest in the budget process. The next name on my list is Patty Lofgren, who would like to make a public comment also about the community navigator position.
Thank you very much. My name is Patty Lofgren. I live at 11935 Southwest Bonner Street here in Tigard. And I want to just ditto everything Liz just said. I so appreciate all your hard work. I have lived in Tigard for 32 years, and I have to say I take Italian with a group of folks in Portland, and they used to tease me about living in Tigard, and now they're jealous about me living in Tigard. So many wonderful things have happened in the last, I would say the last 3 mayors and our new chief of police. I had the honor and privilege of serving on the Public Safety Advisory Board. That was an amazingly positive experience. I'm a former classroom teacher, and I used to do all kinds of workshops for other teachers, and I realized it was taking energy away from my students, and I said, I'm going to say no to anything that doesn't give back more energy than it takes away from my students. And I have to say the Public Safety Advisory Board, with all the work it was, gave back way more energy than it took away. It was such an honor and a privilege. And I'm currently on the Chiefs Advisory Panel because I wanted to continue that important work. The one thing that I would say is that I really appreciate that Tigard has hired the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging new team member. But the thing about that team member is they're faced into the City of Tigard personnel. The community navigator was facing out, and as the Public Safety Advisory Board, we felt strongly that that was one hole that we wanted to fill in terms of making Tigard open and equitable and inclusive and belonging to everyone. And that person was to reach out into the community. And so I think the entire PSAB was pretty disappointed when we did not see that in the budget. So I'd just like to put in a plug for that to be reconsidered. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your testimony and interest in the budget process. And the next name on my list is John Goodhouse, who would like to make public comment about the TCDA dedicated staff.
Thank you. Could I ask a quick question before my time started? I know I submitted comments to staff and council mail. I know also the TDA did, but have budget members have received those? Because when it just got read in, mine hasn't submitted in from last time with Kevin Bates from the TDA. What he submitted wasn't read either, so I just want to make sure that those are getting to the budget committee as a whole. Okay, I just want to make sure because they weren't read during this part, so.
I can read those in the next one.
Okay.
These were all read through the public comment submission, so there's
Okay.
on the website that says you want those read.
Okay.
Those were submitted and emailed with all of their questions.
Okay. Okay.
We'll do that in the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, because otherwise if there needs to be a different process, then I think because people thought they sent it in and they weren't sure, so. Okay.
Yes, there is an actual link that you submit your
So
written
it's-
comment, and then it documents the time and sends
Okay.
to make sure that we get it printed.
Okay. I might just resubmit mine through there and tell them to do the same thing.
That would be perfect. I'll give you a print of it right then.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. So yes, I'd like to, last time I testified and was commenting that the TCAC had met a couple times with council and had asked for a request for a dedicated staff person to the downtown and also the Tigard Triangle to work on economic development. During the presentation, they talked about how there was at least 14 storefronts empty on Main Street. And so part of the process was to keep the existing businesses we had down there, but find ways to bring new business down to those storefronts and find businesses that the community wanted. And so I don't know if that's something that can be looked at as far as adding a dedicated staff person, because that's really what's important to keep the downtown area and the Tigard Triangle as well full of with new businesses and keeping those existing businesses. So if that presentation either from the TCAC could be looked at or that could be considered, it sounded like it was pretty warm welcome from the council, but also it'd be great to look at that because in order to keep a vibrant downtown and a Tigard Triangle, we're going to need businesses that people want. I know when I moved my insurance agency, I didn't move it to downtown Tigard because I didn't want another insurance agency or real estate company, and we need things that are walkable and that people will go to, and will frequent to help the area as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony and interest in the budget process. All right, that is the last name that I have for in-person comment. Is there anyone in the queue, any call in public comment?
We have no callers nor video testimony.
All right, thank you so much. All right, well, I want to just take a moment to thank all the community members who came in person or submitted written testimony for their interest in the budget process. We will appreciate it, and we'll keep it all in mind when we are deliberating on the budget through the rest of this meeting and our meeting on May 8th. If there is any additional public testimony or questions that don't get answered today, please feel free to submit your public comment or questions or testimony ahead of our next meeting on May 8th. Are there any questions or comments from the Budget Committee at this time about anything that was brought up during public comment? Cool. Hearing none, we will move forward to the next item, which is the Town Center Development Agency budget message. Budget Officer, City Manager Steve Reimer is here to present the TCDA budget message.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members of the Budget Committee, my teammates and community members that are here. It's nice to see all of you, and also appreciate the public comments and testimony that we've received both in person as well as in other methods. So tonight, as we've mentioned a couple times, tonight is to talk about the Town Center Development Agency, or TCDA. So you're going to hear TCDA, Town Center Development Agency. You're going to hear TCAC, Town Center Advisory Commission, as we're talking here. What I want to do is just introduce the topic, and then our redevelopment project manager, Sean Fairley, who's grabbing the clicker as we speak, will walk through the entire document. It's important because this is talking about our TIF districts, right? And so this is one of our key funding methods to help grow our community downtown in the city center as well as in the Tigard Triangle. It's meant to really stimulate and be a partner in the growth here to make sure that we're meeting our community's goals and bringing public resources to the various projects and infrastructure to make sure that those are realized into the future. A comment was made tonight by Mr. Goodhouse in regards to the Town Center Advisory Commission's recommendations. If you recall in the budget message, and then you'll hear tonight directly from Mr. Fairley, we did address many, if not all, of the different recommendations that came through there, and so we'll make sure to talk about each of those. We also want to say thank you to the Commission for their ongoing work, the work that they self-initiated, came to the Council, reported on that, and shared their thoughts on what they thought would be best moving forward for both of our TIF districts, the downtown area, as well as the Tigard Triangle. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sean. He's going to walk you through the presentation, and then we're obviously here to answer any questions you have and then provide any follow-up if we're not able to answer it tonight. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sean.
Thanks, Steve. The clicker doesn't seem to be working. Ooh, too far. All right. Good evening, everyone. Members of the TCDA Budget Committee. My name is Sean Farley. I'm the Redevelopment Project Manager, and I manage our projects and programs in our two TIF districts, the City Center and the Tigard Triangle. And the Town Center Development Agency is the legally distinct agency that administers the district and the plans for the two districts. And a real quick 20-second explanation of what a TIF district is. These are areas that are set up in a city where you freeze the property tax rates, and the increase for a set period of time goes into a separate budget to pay for projects that improve the district and revitalize the district. So I will start. There's two different funds, and the funds are separate. They you can't spend city center TIF dollars in the triangle and vice versa. So they're separate funds. I'm going to start with the city center TIF district, which is our mature district, formed in 2006. The maximum indebtedness is $42.8 million, and it had been $22 million for many years until the voters approved a substantial amendment, bringing it up another $20 million. So as TIF districts go around the region, that's still a pretty modest amount, even with 42 million. 42 is obviously can do a lot more than 22 million, but we're still working with a fairly modest amount of money for all of the goals of the district. And I'll start off by going through some of our accomplishments this year, and Universal Plaza. Hopefully you've been able to go down there. This is from our ribbon cutting that was a couple weeks ago. We've completed phase 1 of the construction and the Fanner Creek Path. A couple of finishing touches that we'll be doing for the next few weeks, but will be completed this fiscal year. And it's just a really important project for downtown to have a central gathering place, real attractor, especially during the summer months when we have that really cool water feature going. And also a couple of food carts there to attract people. Main Street Green Street Phase 2, completion is expected in June. That's partially funded by TIF. That will make basically complete the improvements of Main Street. Right now you have the Main Street south of the tracks has been improved, and so this Phase 2 will complete that look throughout the Main Street. The Alongside Senior Apartments, it's been a partnership between the agency and a private developer, Northwest Housing Alternatives. So on the senior center site, under construction right now and progressing very nicely, is 57 affordable senior apartments. And those should be opening up for leasing late summer of this year. So now moving into what we're proposing for next fiscal year. The Nick Wilson Memorial Plaza is a public space that is adjacent to the Cooper Mountain Brew Pub, and basically converting what is now a driveway into a public space that will hook up with the Fanno Creek Trail. And so this will be a nice small space, allow people to interact more with Fanno Creek, visually anyway, and also memorializes a former city councilor, Nick Wilson, who was a landscape architect and who kind of had a vision for this area, and also had his offices right above there in the corner of the second story of the brew pub. Oh, and so we will be doing design, engineering, and permitting. Won't actually be going to construction for until the following fiscal year. Another item that's proposed is a downtown wayfinding plan. So providing a good way for people to find their way around downtown, and it'll serve all modes of transportation, mostly walking and biking, but we'll also have a couple of things for autos. So it'll be a really nicely designed and integrated into our trail signage, and just tell people how to get to where they want to go downtown. Also proposed, we have development assistance. So this is incentives for mixed use or affordable projects that demonstrate a financial need. And then we have our building improvement grants. We are substantially increasing that budget for next year because there's a recommendation from that TCAC group that was mentioned to boost the maximum matching grants available for eating and drinking establishments. So rather than $50,000, and the new maximum grant is $75,000, and that recognizes the importance to getting new restaurants and drinking establishments downtown, and also recognizes that it's a lot more expensive typically to put in a restaurant. There's all sorts of HVAC and fire suppression and other items that need to be added to a building if it's not already a restaurant. So that is all for the city center. Now moving to our newer and larger TIF district, and that is the Tigard Triangle. It's formed in 2017, and maximum dentist is $188 million. So that's quite a bit more than the city center. It's lasts over 30 years. And just to give you an idea of the difference of the kind of scope of the districts, and this district has been in place for 6 years, and it's already collecting double the amount of TIF that the city center has collected after 17 years. So that gives you some sense of the different scale this district is. I mean, it's a much larger area as well. So some of our accomplishments, we have a robust development assistance program in our triangle. We have an agreement that's been made to assist Family Promise of Tualatin Valley to purchase the Quality Inn. They're going to convert that to transitional housing for houseless families and individuals. Development assistance this past year, we've the Overland Mixed-Use Project, which is that large building in the corner of 72nd and Dartmouth, very a signature building, kind of defines the district. That has finally been completed and opened. It's 215 market rate apartments and commercial space, and development assistance paid for a portion of those STCs. There's really been an explosion of interest in developers in the Triangle in terms of housing, just many units coming online, and more that we're hearing about that are being planned. Another development assistance for a project that is getting underway now is a smaller building on Hampton Street. It's going to be one of the most energy efficient mixed-use buildings in the region, and construction has started on that, and that'll be great when it's done. In the Triangle, we have a matching grant program that we call the Business Opportunity Fund, and we've made our first two grants awarded this year, and one of them is El Jefe, which is a restaurant on 99W that should be having its grand opening pretty soon here. So getting into what's proposed for next fiscal year, we have an Infrastructure Opportunity Fund, and that's a private-public partnership agreement that in this case will construct some pedestrian improvements that will connect the REACH project, which I'll talk about in a moment, filling in some missing sidewalk gaps and improving pedestrian connections. And that fund will also be available for potential new partnerships that come forward this fiscal year. And here is that REACH project I mentioned. It's also received development assistance last fiscal year. It's going to be 75-unit affordable housing on 69th and Clinton. And we'll also have other funds available for this fiscal year if a new project comes our way. Another major priority, since we have all this residential development going in, is to acquire parkland, and we're actively pursuing a couple of leads. Land is quite expensive in the Triangle now because there's also developers interested in the land, but we're confident we will secure some property here soon. And then we've bumped up our budget for the Opportunity Fund to allow us to make more grants. Those go go fund, they're matching grants that fund facade improvements and tenant improvements in the triangle. We also link, distinct from the city center program, we link it a little more to new entrepreneurs who are getting services from our economic development partners, our nonprofit ECDEV partners that we work with. And then finally, funded by the City Center and the Triangle Fund, we're proposing a new position which would be funded by the TIF, and that would assist in management of projects and programs in both districts. There's been one FTE working on TIF projects since 2006, and we now have a second district and a lot more complicated projects and opportunities for more projects and programs. So that's why we're proposing to increase the FTE from 1 to 2. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I figure we'll just go around the room. I'll call on everyone, give everyone a chance to make comment or ask questions. As far as I go, I'd just like to hear a little bit more about what the grant approval process looks like across both TIFs. Just sort of how does that work? And I may have missed who we're matching grants with, so just a little more about that would be great.
So we got two different we've got two districts, and in each district we have two different kind of grant programs. So the matching grants aimed at businesses and property owners, those are businesses or property owners apply to staff, and then staff reviews the application and brings it to a committee, and that committee is made of 2 members of the TCDA board and 2 members of the TCAC. And they review the application, and the applicant will come to those meetings, and they'll make their decision about whether to fund those proposed projects. And if they're awarded, then we work out a legal agreement with the applicant, and upon completion of the project, then they're paid half of the agreed to cost. The development assistant program is a little bit different in that the applicant comes and meets a whole set of criteria, has to address a whole set of criteria. Staff reviews that and brings that application to the Town Center Advisory Commission, and they make a recommendation to the TCDA board, who has the final decision whether to make that award. And then an agreement is worked out in advance of that and formalized once TCDA board approves that, if they approve that.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Where's my list? All right. Tim Cadman, do you have any questions or comments?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Kelly Pemmon.
No questions.
Leah Voigt.
Yeah, I'm wondering, in terms of how TIF works, I know for a lot of the other items in the budget, we get a comparison between how it was originally forecast and kind of how it's going. And I was curious if you could give us that information for the 2 TIF districts, in terms of like where the revenue differences and the change in property taxes and how much funding it's bringing in.
So the TIF depends on what kind of development happens in the district. There's also the 3% increase that happens under the state Oregon law, so that goes into funding the TIF. And what was the second part of your question?
Yeah, my question was, I guess it's the underlying assumption is that when the TIF districts were created, there was some sort of projected income to go back towards the district went through the TIF designation. And so my question is, the income that we're seeing now, how does that compare to the initial projections for both districts.
Gotcha. So the Tiger Triangle is, I think, exceeding our expectations, and then the city center, since it was formed in 2006, and then we had the Great Recession of 2008-9, right around then, that kind of depressed the TIF for a while, and I think we're probably still seeing a little bit of that hangover. But now it's, when we did the substantial amendment, we did a new estimate of TIF, and then we're just about what has been predicted in 2021.
Thank you. My next question is, in terms of clarification, and I have not been following the TCAC, that's on me. The role that the FTE that's being proposed and the type of work that it would be doing compared to the FTE that was requested by Mr. Goodhouse, I guess, what are the similarities and differences there?
Yeah, we've recognized that this position could, that could be one of their duties to help attract new businesses to the downtown in particular. One of our our major tools in that respect is our grant program, which we have been marketing to the property owners of the vacant spaces, letting them know that's available. So that's really the best way to get new business downtown, is to let people know about that grant program. So while there's a lot of other things this position will be doing, that what Councilor Goodhouse mentioned before would be among their duties, but not primarily.
Thank you. And then this, actually, that's all. Thank you so much.
Kenny, I see your hand is raised. Do you have anything to add?
Thank you, Chair, and hello, everybody. Only just to amplify what Sean said in response, I think the only difference here is that the TCAC was looking for a position that would exclusively focus on recruitment, and we see the role being broader than that. We don't think that there's actually 40 hours of work a week for just that activity, and we also do have other project management needs. Capital planning, capital design, the implementation of projects, supporting the committee's work, expanding our outreach. So as the districts have grown, Sean has had to handle all of that. We'd like to support that, and we think that would still leave some time to be able to work on the exact thing that the TCAC and the former counselor have asked for. I hope that helps.
Thank you. Do you have any further questions? All right, thank you. Jim Knowlton, do you have any questions?
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Lube?
I don't have any questions, but I actually found it really helpful. Committee Member Voigt, on page 5 and 9 of the TCDA budget, for the City Center Urban Renewal Area in May 2006, initial assessed value was $117 million, and the assessed value projected for fiscal year 24 is $191 million. So I just think that's really helpful to see the difference. And then for the Tigard Triangle, the base assessed value in May of 2017 was $424 million, and projected fiscal year 24 is $556 million. So you can see that's growing at a greater rate, but it doesn't answer how it fits in, but I think it's really helpful just to have those numbers. I don't have any other questions.
Thank you for highlighting that. Councilor Hu?
So the downtown wayfinder, $75,000, is that just for design or is that for the implementation as well?
That's just for design.
So how much do you think that the implementation will cost, or would that be known until the design is done?
Yeah, we're not going to know until the design is done the level of finish and how many signs.
Okay. And regarding the park in the Tiger Triangle, I noticed in the CIP park there's a little budget for Red Rock Creek Trail implementation plan. So the park from TIF district budget will be transferred to that as well, or would
That is a grant-funded program.
Okay.
So that is a state grant. So they are planning the alignment of the Red Rock Creek Trail. And eventually that'll be built out with future TIF budgets and future development around the alignment.
So going back to the Wayfinder, so I assume we're going to have find future budget somehow to implement those things, the Wayfinder recommendation. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Shaw.
Yes, thank you. Just want to say I'm thrilled that the city of Tigard has the TIF because I think that's an incredible tool for our economic toolbox. And Sean, just perhaps just a quick question. With this new TIF position, which I think will really help, and I hear you've been solo since 2006, does that lead you to do more economic development if this person's doing more project management? Thank you.
Well, since it's TIF funded, you can only work on TIF district related things. So, I mean,
correct.
Economic development, you could say TIF is part of economic development, but it's economic development limited to the two districts. So
correct.
Can't work on citywide issues, but only within those districts.
No, and then for the TIF districts, would you be then have available time to work more than economic development for the TIF districts?
Yes, I would.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Singh.
That's,
oh, sorry. Councillor
that's
Shaw.
good. I just think it's a great, I'm glad to see that there's some additional resources. I think it's well needed, so thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Singh.
I don't have any questions.
Councillor Wolf.
None at this time.
Are there any other questions or comments regarding the proposed budget for the TCDA? All right. Well, thank you so much for the presentation. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. The next item on our agenda is some time that we have reserved to discuss the community navigator position. As you all will recall from public comment earlier today and also from the April 22nd meeting, this is a matter that several members of the community have been urging the Budget Committee to consider, and so this time is dedicated to discuss this matter. City Manager Reimer.
I'm happy to start the conversation since there's been continued questions for us. I'm talking to myself and others, so that might help just to frame it, some of where we were coming from. Myself and then our Assistant City Manager, Kathy Nyland, will provide a little more specifics as well, and then we're obviously here to answer any questions. To assist in the dialogue as you see fit. So if I can, I'll start with just a few comments. So first I want to start by talking about the process and acknowledging the process isn't what it should have been. So I think as the Public Safety Advisory Board completed their work, brought forward their report, there's an expectation there'd be more dialogue going on, working through it. And this is on me. I take ownership for this, that should have engaged them closer in the conversation leading up to this. So they had an understanding of where we're at and why the proposed budget was going to be that way. It was more of a reaction to that, and so I do just want to acknowledge that and realize that's part of why we're here, because that did not take place. I also want to acknowledge that the good work that PSAB did, Public Safety Advisory Board. You've heard about it, you've read about it. I think you understand the valuable work that they did. You heard the experiences of two of our members that are here today and what they got out of personally as well as serving our community. And I bring it up because The proposal of not including the navigator should not be a reflection that of the important work that they did, of the items that they brought forward, and specifically the navigator position has really been a very focused way of saying there's a need in this community. There's a need to better serve all of our communities of color, our immigrant communities, those that maybe don't have that relationship or the trust and confidence of us yet. So we recognize that as well. With that, multiple things have changed in this organization. I'd say for the last 18 months, really anchored in our racial equity action plan, with the goal of addressing and eliminating both individual as well as the systemic racism that we have. And so the document that we have is really intended to do those things. And it's intended to do it by training up and making all of us, the 350 people that work here, as well as our city council, hopefully our boards and others, trained in those areas. So I do agree that our first DEIB manager, Kurt, he's really internal focused for the most part, but he's also trying to establish some of those community relationships. The internal focus, though, is the important part, because what we're trying to do is get all of us to understand how we can better work and serve our entire community. And that goes through our training processes, it goes through the conversations that we're having. And so there's a great deal of work that's been going on in that area. I don't think it's work that ever ends, to be honest with you. We'll continue to grow in that and continue to find ways of making sure we're truly serving our community. Some things that we've done during that period, we've fostered a relationship with the Tigard-Tualatin School District and learning from them. From an organization standpoint, they've been a couple strides ahead of us, if you will. And so we had the opportunity, many of us sitting here, as well as supervisors, our diversity, equity, inclusion advisory team, to work through a training with them, multiple sessions on just understanding how we serve each other and how we serve our community in a better way. A couple weeks ago, we were sitting here in a configuration close to this, and I think, to me, that was when we were starting to see the investment in our team starting to really show how we're dealing and working with our community. And that was Judge Emily Oberdorfer's conversation that she had, where she really talked about, it was her annual report for the courts, but she really used the equity lens in her entire report and talked about the things that they're doing, that she's doing as a judge and they're doing as a team, to make sure we continue to serve our entire community as they're coming to our court, which once again is not a spot that that individuals want to be at. And so finding ways to make it welcoming and accessible, and ultimately with a goal of working with them as individuals rather than being punitive. And so from that, I've also asked the entire organization, so all department heads, Kathy, Emily, Cindy, and others, to share what their departments are doing in this work, and really focused on how are we better serving our communities of color. And it's not just our overall equity work, but really focused on that. And so this week they're going to be sharing many of that information with me for a couple of reasons. One is, I think it's important that as an organization we understand the things we're doing. It's information that we'll want to be able to share out with the city council and the community as well. So the goal is to understand what we're doing, what we have ideas to do, and then what gaps can continue to exist, and find ways to close those gaps. The last thing I want to say before I turn over to Kathy for some additional comments is, regardless what the budget committee decides to add the navigator position or continue with the proposed budget as it is, it shouldn't be the end of the conversation. I know we don't view it the end of the conversation. It's really, some ways, the beginning. To others, it's the middle of the conversation, but it's one that we need to continue to have amongst ourselves, but as importantly with the PSAB members, invite them in, help us understand what we can continue to do. If it is a navigator position, help us build that navigator position, the job description. If it's not, what are other things that Tigard as the organization can do to move forward and try to address those gaps that they brought forward to us. So with that, I'll turn over to Kathy, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have of us before you start your dialogue. So, Kathy?
Great. Thank you, City Manager Reimer. So good evening, members of the Budget Committee. Before I jump into my speech because it is essentially a speech. I want to acknowledge Emily because at last budget committee, there was a question about asset management, and she's just like, yes, I'm so passionate about this issue. I have so much to say. This is my moment. I'm so passionate about this issue, which is why I essentially wrote a speech, because I didn't want to get it wrong, and it's so important that we have a well-informed conversation about this really important topic about making Tigard a city that it's welcoming and safe for everyone. So first I want to thank everyone for all of your great questions and inquiries about the proposed fiscal year budget. The budget is probably the most important thing we do every year. It's a reflection of who we are and what we believe in, and it's a document that captures what we invest in. So as you know, we received several comments about the navigator position and then received several additional inquiries. For background, as Steve mentioned, this was a position that was recommended by the Public Safety Advisory Board, and that was considered along with many other positions as we developed this budget. And as you know, that particular position is not currently included in this proposed budget. So I imagine that everyone in this room tonight wants a city that is equitable and just, a city that feels safe, is safe, a place where you can walk down the street, make eye contact, and hold your partner's hand without thinking twice. A place where you can be your best and true self. I'm not going through puberty, my voice is cracking because it's emotional. We have made and will continue to make investments in creating such a place of belonging. I'm not going to spend time pushing back on the idea of a navigator. Instead, I'm going to push forward. I believe we can do these things internally to improve and advance the experience of those externally. They say every system is perfectly designed to get the results it gets. There are instances where our results are not ideal, and we can do better. We should do better. So I offer this. Yes, we can focus on a position, but I'd like to also focus on our systems, changing our systems. That could be a catalyst for the bigger cultural and organizational change we seek. Many of our systems are created as if people know government. We assume people can look outside and go, that's a local government, that's a regional government, that's the county government, that's a different entity. We expect people to know which department might provide assistance on an issue. That's a huge assumption and frankly, unrealistic. You know it and are familiar with it. Many people don't even know we exist. Our job is to make things easier. We have started this work, as Steve mentioned. This year, we've updated our website, and the focus was not on departments. The focus was on issues. We focused on issues and solutions. So when people logged on and have a question, we mapped it so people, thank you, Nancy, for your work on that, so people can navigate an easier way. That's just one example of the work we are doing. So imagine a city that had one phone number to call. People could just pick up a phone and call 1-800-1-Tigard, and you'd get someone who answered the phone and could lead you to where to go. Imagine if we had a 311 system where people could report an issue. That's in the works. We will have that. Tyler, had to say Tyler at least once. So imagine us having a CRM database where we collected all of our contacts in one place and we could index them. So when there was an issue about parks, we know who's interested in parks. So imagine if we had a program that identified venues throughout the city that were accessible, ADA compliant, where communities can go to gather that wasn't necessarily a church or a government building, because not everyone feels comfortable walking through the doors. Imagine if we really focused on the E in excellence, having something like a customer bill of rights. Nordstrom is known for their customer service. How about Tigard being known for our customer service, being the Nordstrom of government agencies? And then we have a team already in place, our engagement coordinators. They're great, but often they're project focused. What if we pivoted them and have them really be people-based? This is a group that's out in community. They should be having conversations, establishing relationships, and building trust. Engagement does not have a starting and stopping point. It is an ongoing, continuous conversation. Or as Liz Newton stated, it provides regular contact. Engagement is one way to build stronger trust with our community. Done well, engagement can change the way community feels about a city. I've done this work. I believe in this work. Again, I'm not arguing against the navigator. However, I believe the essence can be accomplished in different ways, at least for right now, with a very lean budget. One step is acknowledging that barriers exist that discourage or prevent people from participating. Some examples of our barriers. Language. Language matters. You may note your table tents don't say citizen anymore. We've changed it to community or just a name. The word citizen is a trigger and doesn't welcome everyone. In this meeting, we had some community members who provided their address at the beginning. We actually changed that process 2 years ago because it's not safe for everyone. If you came in and wanted to testify about domestic violence, providing your address could be traumatizing. It's the small things we do that can make a big difference. We saw that in the State of the City speech. We offered childcare. It removed a barrier so people could participate. Tonight, we provided dinner to make things a little bit easier so you didn't have to think about what you needed to do to get here. So let's take the time to identify obstacles and turn them into opportunities. Opportunities so everyone in our community can reach their full potential. Whether Navigator is funded or not, the work to make Tigard an equitable place will go on. And as I wrote that, I instantly have Celine Dion song in my head. I'm just gonna sing that. I'm not happy with myself. So much work has been done in recent months about equity. The city is developing an equity statement, and many in this room have created their own. One of my mantras, my core belief is this: everyone has a voice. It's our job to hear them, navigator or not. So thanks for your time. Thanks for listening. Let the discussion begin.
Thank you so much for those remarks and explanations. I feel like as chair of the budget committee, I need to ask though, regarding the community navigator position, is it still accurate that this would, if the committee were to approve such a position, that it would be approximately $150,000 recurring general fund expense?
So yes, roughly, because it'd be the position and the associated costs. We want to make sure that they have a budget to actually do some of the work as well. So upwards of the $150,000. In terms of general fund, as I think we mentioned in one of our responses, our first inclination is general fund. We'd also want to look at to see if it would be potentially central services fund, but our first thought is it's a general fund expense. So.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for City Manager Reimer or Assistant City Manager Nyland before we go have a discussion? Leah Voigt?
Clarifying, when you say, central services, that's the one where all of the departments fund part of it because it's doing work that affects all of them?
Correct.
That's
yeah, and that's why we want to really look at the position and understand if it is, then we look at essential services.
Yeah, so thank you. I would love to hear more about, and I know it's challenging because the full job description hasn't been written, but in terms of the vision that's been expressed by the PSAB recommendations, where do you see that already? So you've said kind of it happens everywhere in the city, which is good and important, and we should definitely keep pushing that forward. that work already happening? And where do you see it not happening yet, in terms of specifically compared to, you know, the ability to call one phone number, the ability to have a community liaison, a non-official ombudsman position, and accessibility facilitator, those kinds of things. You know, if someone has a complaint, if someone doesn't know who to talk to in the city, how does that currently work? How are those currently being provided?
Well, why don't I start? Thanks for the questions. I'll try to hit on all those that I can recall. Kathy, Halstead, Emily, others that are department heads. So it's happening in many different ways, and I'm going to learn more as the departments share the information. But I can think of things in our economic development team and the way that we invite different communities in to receive training and workshops. It's not just for Tigard residents. I think some of them have been so successful that other communities have partnered with us, and members of their communities have come here as well, which I think has been great, because that's really, you know, if you think fundamentally, that ability to have the ability to be an entrepreneur and provided the tools. So we spent a lot of time in our economic development team, you know, really with that equity-centered economic development. The council's talked about that multiple times in terms of what we do. You can build off of that with what's happening down at Universal Plaza, not only space that is built and the purpose for that space, and for our entire community, the launch pods that are there now are two more examples of how we, the city, have been able to really be catalysts towards two new entrepreneurs starting their businesses. Same thing as at the library with our Opportunity Cafe. I can't speak to all the library programs. I know we just had one, Halstead, but Halstead was our library director behind, could probably spend an hour here talking about how our library has really embraced and engaged working with our entire community in all different ways that Kathy is. Some of the things that she says, can you imagine? One of the answers is yes. Some of that is happening at the library, literally, and has been for a number of years. So I think that's another a great example. There's a lot of our planning work that when I first arrived here over 2 years ago now, I was thoroughly impressed by what I was hearing from our planning team, from our Parks and Recreation team as we're looking at our system plans. These may not sound like the things that change Tigard, but they are the things that change Tigard, because those are what we really build our built environment off of, our park system. So you heard last time in our capital improvement program, bringing forward the ability to fund parks in, I'd say, maybe unserved areas of our community, not just underserved, but unserved, and looking at Bagan and Steve Street, how equity is a driving factor in our park system plan. The same with the library strategic plan that was adopted right around the same time, very much is all based in equity, and what's happening now is operationalizing that, if you will. So the teams are either through our capital improvement program and the planning that you saw, through the programs that are being provided by our team. Those are some of the examples of how we're trying to connect with the entire community. And there's more examples, right, of things that are happening. If you look at even who we are trying to become as an organization, and looking at trying to attract individuals to our team that are of great quality, that are bilingual, that can really bring some of their lived experiences to us and help us get better on how we are serving each other in the community itself. There's a number one commitment and focus by our leadership team, as I mentioned. This is where one of our gaps is making sure that who is on our team doesn't really reflect our community, and understanding what that data says. And so just next week on the 9th, we're going to be meeting over at the library as a leadership team and really talking about that, looking at our entire recruitment process so we don't make false assumptions. Is it how we're advertising positions? Does that lead to getting diverse candidate pools? Is it how we're screening applications? Is it how we're going through the interview process? Is it those final decisions? So kind of those major phases, and trying to understand that, and then being very much action oriented on finding ways to address that. So one of the things I've been talking about with the leadership team, and they've been talking about as well, and Kathy just talked about, is moving from concept to action. And so we have a lot of the plans in place, like the Racial Equity Action Plan and others, and it's putting a higher priority on making these things become a reality sooner than later. So kind of long-winded. There's other examples, and if others want to jump in, I'd be happy to have them share some information.
I can provide a couple examples that came to mind when you asked that question. I would say about half of the phone calls I receive are from a community member who states, "I didn't know who to call, so I called you." And I'm like, "Tell me what your problem is. What can I help with?" And it's everything from my garbage didn't get picked up to there's a light out. So it's, I think people just don't know. They just don't know where to start, and they pick up the phone and hope for a human voice. And then the other thing that came to mind is our organization, people on the team are asking questions that they've never asked in years, and that's really encouraging. Just this week I had a team member ask me, does this material need to be translated? And I'm like, great question, thanks for thinking that way. So we had that conversation, and then I also talked about what needs to happen to get to a point where you need to translate material, because we can translate material and have it sit on a table and have no one, because we didn't do the work to get that community to the table, let them know the conversation was happening, let them know what resources were available. So that work is happening. People are thinking about it, which is great, because that's what we need to do, is take the time to think about what we are doing and how we can make it easier and more accessible for everyone.
So my follow-up question to that would be, you mentioned that half your phone calls are from community members, which is great that you are answering those questions. And I think for me personally, rather than it does show how the work is happening already, and further enforces that idea that having a dedicated community liaison member would be incredibly valuable. It's definitely a needed service that people are using already, and I know that you answer all those questions, and I also know that it's probably not that it's not part of your job description, but that you have other items in your job description, and that wasn't intended to be a primary part of your role. And so I hear that it's happening, and I think that's great. And I hear that there is a need that does exist that you are currently filling. And I wanted to also say that I really appreciate your comment about changing systems, because that is absolutely, as we talk about equity, as we talk about access, systems change is what matters and is what needs to happen. And so I'm really glad to hear all these systematic changes happening. And I guess I wonder the possibility of the both and, right? The short-term solutions happening while the long-term solutions are being rolled out. That ability to have, whether it's part-time of a community engagement position, or if there are other places that it is happening in the community or in the departments, the ability to kind of consolidate that into one position, have it be a central services position. Just looking at the different ways of doing it. Thank you so much.
And we do have several community engagement coordinators as part of the team already. And I think that's going to be a future conversation, is that the comms team and the engagement team meets weekly. And we will be convening in the next couple of weeks to just talk about best practices of outreach and engagement, and how to, again, be more accessible and not necessarily continue doing what we've done, but do what we've done and more.
Yeah, one of my questions would be, again, my own ignorance. I don't know everything a communications and engagement team does, and I'm sure it is a lot. Maybe not to answer in this moment, but in terms of exploring, what would it mean if one of those positions was converted into a PSAB or a community navigator position? Would there be ways for, if we're saying they already do outreach and engagement, are there ways that could become the priority focus of the role, or maybe a 2/3 time or half, just looking at other ways of doing it as well. And then I was also curious if someone does have a problem with the city, what's the current complaint line grievance process? What's the opening door for that? You? Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, there are days where I'm like, hi, Lube Complaint Department, how can I help you? Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
So I'm going to do a bit of rambling because quite frankly, I don't know where I land on this issue. And I think I'm grappling with it because I hear our community members and I trust what they're saying because I don't have that same experience. And so they're being vulnerable and honest and saying, it can be intimidating to talk to the city, but when you build a relationship with somebody, it opens that door. So I trust that piece of them and I trust them. And I also see in the past 4 years how far the city has come. I will tell you, even in the differences between the prior mayor communication and my communication has been totally different in the expectation that I have with our city teammates on how we answer people's questions. I expect that the name of the person, their phone number, their email address, if it's somebody else, we'll copy it, we'll send them to a website. We will do the connecting for them so they don't have to do any additional work to navigate or find anything, because I think that's really annoying, right? Like, I'm going to tell you where everything is and then I'm going to go tell you to Google it. No, we know what it is, right? Like, as the city, we know how to connect people, and that's our responsibility to do that. So I've seen the changes that we're having, and I know we're getting there, but I also understand the need that they're talking about from a practical standpoint. Putting on my day job hat and thinking about what does this actually look like in practice, because I feel like some of the requests are valid, but I also think it's completely unreasonable for somebody to connect with the BIPOC community and know exactly what they need to do for the permit process. Like, those to me are kind of two different things of connecting to community and being a place and then knowing everything that the city does and hand-holding everybody through that, right? Like, we have 350 people and that's impossible for them to always do in their area. And I don't want to set this position up for failure or say that this is the end-all be-all solution so no one else in the organization has to do that either. So that feels like an unreasonable ask. And what does success look like? Who do they report to? What does that job expectation look like? And I feel like it's not fully formed because I'm still trying to grapple with exactly what the problem we're trying to solve is. Is it the community connection piece and really reaching out and connecting with the BIPOC community and underserved communities and saying we're here for you and we're listening to you and we're in partnership with you? Or is it saying when you call the city, oh, you don't know what this is, you're going to the planning commission to contest something, and we need to help you understand because it's a very technical process, what are the steps? And I think I go back to, I'm still not fundamentally understanding exactly the problem we're trying to solve because I think those answers look very different. But I know in general, as a city, we're working really, really hard to not be so government, to not be so jargony, to meet people where they are and say, tell me what you're trying to do, I'm trying to answer that. So, Kathy is saying she answers a bunch of stuff. And my social media blows up and people are just just like, hey, so, and I'm like, great, let me go ahead and connect you. You know, I think that's also kind of the responsibility for us as elected officials too. We're supposed to be that in between of saying, we represent you to the government, to your local government, but we also understand all the super jargony stuff, and we're gonna help walk you through that. So again, long ramble to say, I don't know where I fall in this issue because I see it. I see the need that they're asking for, but I also don't know that that's the only way to get there. I don't know if that's helpful at all.
Leah Voigt.
I think there's a lot of things you say that I agree with, and I think one of the challenges that we're facing, and I don't have an answer to this, is that as long as the position is a proposal, that those details of what does it look like don't get fleshed out in terms of like the job description isn't created. But if we don't put the position in place, the job description doesn't get created, and therefore we don't know what the job description is and if we need it or not. And it's a tricky, because right, how do you know if you need it if you don't know the fundamental problem it's serving, if you don't know what the day-to-day's responsibilities would look like, if you don't know what department it belongs in, but also how do we get all that information if we don't move forward with it and flesh out those details? So it's complicated.
Sort of a question on that point, since it is a new proposal, and I think I asked this in some of my written questions about the position. My understanding is that there aren't any other municipalities in the metro area that have a community navigator position. The City of Portland has an ombudsman office, but that's sort of the only comparable example that we have right now in the local community. Is that an accurate assessment?
From our understanding, yes. I think that PSAB talked about it as well. I think it may have started with Portland's position as, I was not in the conversations, but recall that may have been a starting point for an example.
Yeah, that's my belief as well. And if I may, I'd love to respond to Mayor Lubes talking about what problem we're trying to solve. So one of the things that we are starting to is doing some legwork to get a better understanding of who our community is, who's at the table, who knows there is a table, and Councilor Wolf, you will recognize what I'm going to say now. Who doesn't even know there is a table? There's so many in our community that don't know about this meeting, don't know that there's an opportunity to have a conversation, don't know what the outcome of this meeting will be. So we feel, I feel at least, we have so much work to do to gather data and get a better understanding and then have this conversation. One of the things that we're doing, as we know, we love surveys. We love to launch a survey. We are going to put optional demographic questions on every survey that we launch, so we get an idea of who's responding, and that will give us some data that will tell us who's not responding. We're going to do inclusive sign-up sheets at every meeting so people can sign up, and if they're comfortable, let us know who they are. Again, those demographic questions. So again, we can see what tools are working, who responds to what. We're going to do an inventory of our communication tools, whether it's social media or in person, and then do that crosswalk of here's everything that we have in our toolbox. Here's who's responding. Here's who we're hearing from. Here's who we're not. What can we do to reach out to the underserved? And I feel I need to say something. When we talk about people of color, I want to make sure we don't fall into that line of thinking of, oh, I talked to this person and this person represents that entire race. That person represents that person. And I say that because I get this all the time. Like, hey, Kathy, tell me what's going on in this community. And I'm like, I can't even tell you what's going on in the household. So I represent me. So just a word of caution to keep that in mind. People represent themselves.
Thank you. Yeah, the reason I ask that question about sort of comparable positions in the metro area specifically is I think when we're considering the addition of full-time employees, when you say we're proposing to hire a senior accountant, I think we can all get sort of the general idea of what that's going to look like. Or another, 2 more community-focused police officers, 2 more parks workers. And I think we can all, because we have examples that we can look at either in our own community or in neighboring communities, we can get a really good idea of what that looks like, what we're bringing into our community or bolstering. I think one of the problems I had as a community member who didn't actively follow the deliberations of PSAB in 2022, I confess I did not actively follow it, was when I first heard the community navigator position. I couldn't quite understand what it was, and I come very much from Mayor Loop's perspective of like when we hire this person, when they sit down on their first day at their desk, what are they going to be doing? And I don't discount that in the future, after a lot of data is gathered and sort of thought through, that a position like this could be a benefit to the city of Tigard. But if the idea is that we're going to, as a budget committee, recommend $150,000 recurring appropriation from either the general fund or the central services fund for a position that we're still trying to flesh out, that process, at least as chair, just sort of concerns me a little bit. But of course, I see the value of the position. But for fiscal year 24, I'm just not sure if the door is still open for that at this point. Leah Voigt?
Yeah, I would like to add to that conversation that I haven't done my own research, so I'm taking it as a truth that other similar cities don't have this position, but other cities have other positions that we don't have. Mayor Lee was talking about planning, and so for example, the city of Portland has someone who is specifically dedicated within their, I think their permitting and development committee that is a liaison for underrepresented community members and helps them walk through the permitting process, and looks at looks at other stuff they need to know. It provides grants and stipends and facilitates that process. It provides technical assistance. And so yes, it's true that under that title and as only one person, it's not happening in other places, but there is a lot more work that is happening in other places around this topic that we are not doing. And so it's, and sorry, not to discount all the work we are doing, because we are, because you are. So I want to bring that into the conversation, because I think that's a more accurate representation. And I also think in terms of saying I don't know if we can go forward with it this year, I think there's a couple things that happen. One is when there's a yes vote. If there were to be a yes vote, that's when you say, okay, what does that look like? We're going to make this happen. Let's make it happen. And I also think, why can't they be a part of gathering that data? Why can't their job on day one, be answering all the questions and making a plan of what does this position look like and where do we go forwards? And also in terms of when we talk about funding, So for example, we are proposing, in the past, for example, Parks has requested several, I think it was summer seasonal and several employees. And as a budget committee, we said, you've requested 3, we'll give you 2. And so I think also there are several requests elsewhere in the budget, and which are well-deserved, and we don't want people understaffed. That's how we also lose our existing staff. But also there are other departments, including ones being funded by general fund, that are requesting multiple new positions within the same department. And so to say we can't, I just don't think is accurate. It's not going to look the way we anticipated. It's not going to look the way that the budget has been put together as is. But if it's something that we say as a value, we want to make sure that we fund this. and maybe we're not sure, and maybe we're working that out, and it's complicated. But I think to say, if we say on value we want this to happen, there's always a way to make that happen. And it will affect other parts of the budget. It will. And it's, yeah, if there's a will, there's a way. So deciding if the support is there or not, or if it's the right time or not.
Thank you. Councillor Wolf?
Great conversation, so I'll try to move quickly here. Appreciate both city manager and assistant city manager Nyland on their conversations. I think, so as I was sitting here, just kind of quickly jumped on site, on the website and on the mobile app, because a lot of people aren't using their laptop, they're using their phone. And this is certainly not Safe Oregon, but it reminds me of my district work there was something very quick, very immediate that you clicked on that if you needed support. Now that is a very high level, serious concern, but I also wonder if there's a model, and you, Kathy, mentioned Tyler, but Tyler's not going to be up and running on July 1st and have that accessible piece, whether that's on your phone or on the laptop. And the reason I'm sharing this is I am 100% behind the systems changes that are occurring, but if I'm just an average citizen or resident community member of Tigard and I speak Spanish and I'm trying to figure out where I go and who I connect with, I may not know that I should call Kathy. How do I find that? Do I click 3 places down? And so I too am kind of wrestling. I appreciate everything that Halstead does in the library to make that opening and welcoming. Surveys are really tricky. I think we all have a sense of the most like person who's going to go online and do a survey versus those who aren't. So I think what I'm trying to say is I want to support the systems work. I understand the constraints on a budget, but I feel like that's still practical. What is the average person who is concerning? What are those concerns? What is our system for them to have an immediate connection? Mayor Lubes talked a lot about, I'm a go-to, and I want to make sure. I want some kind of measurement piece so that if 3 months we didn't hit the mark, and we still have Valerie or Jimmy Brown coming to us and saying, this is not working. You made a commitment that you were present and able, but we're not getting there. Then that's what I'm willing to say, let's create a plan, let's measure it. And if we win or we fail on a lot of spots, I think we have to revisit it. Because I want to honor the concerns that Liz Newton and other members have brought forward who are committed to truly being accessible. And I'm not sure, I absolutely believe it's our goal and we're working really, really hard to get there. I don't know that we're right there right now. So that's my thoughts.
I'd like to give an opportunity for some of the members who haven't spoken yet to provide comment. I'm just going to go down the list. Tim Cadman, do you have any questions or comments or thoughts at this time?
Yeah, I guess I'll just share a couple of thoughts that are rambling around in my head. It seems like the easiest solution to a problem frequently is to throw more heads at it, right? That's the easiest way to do it. Oh, we need something? Let's get somebody to fix it, right? I think, I'm looking up at the wall that there are six figures that are not representing themselves. They're supposed to be representing the community. The community should be able to go to any of those 6 people on that wall and say, hey, I'm lost, I need help, where do I go? And if we haven't communicated as a government that our city council is available for our citizens, then we failed right there, in my opinion. So I think that's step 1. If we go do all these things and still we're missing the mark, then I think you come back and say, all right, does there need to be a dedicated human person that's going to be out serving the 55,000 people? But until we've kind of figured out whether or not or why we can't get them to call the people that they've elected to represent them, I don't think we should be spending the money on another head count just to solve another problem. So that's my thought.
Thank you. Kelly Pemmond?
Thank you. This is my first time on the budget committee, as you guys all know that, so I'm going to ask weird questions. So I looked for some comparable positions, just doing some light Googling, and I didn't find anything that was even remotely close to what I think this position is supposed to accomplish. But that being said, I kind of got into the same questions that Mayor Lou brought up, which is I don't super know what this role is supposed to do, and I realize a lot of that is just my ignorance, but I don't know how to fund something if I don't know what that thing is. So I guess if there's something out there that somebody could point me to where I could learn more about it, that would be great. The closest thing I found was healthcare navigators, which I think was not totally analogous, so not super helpful. So if you guys have anything, or anybody who provided public comment can point me to something so that I can make the right decision for community, I would love that. That's all.
Thank you. Jim Knowlton?
So I guess my just general feeling about it is similar to Tim Cadman's in that I think we all recognize that there's an issue, and it's just a question of how do we address the issue, and whether the additional headcount and the expense associated with it is the right way to sort of fix the issue. So and you know, it may be that there's other ways to sort of fix this besides adding another person. And so I guess I would be in favor of, you know, thinking more clearly about why we have the issue, and is another person really the resolution of it? Because if we add another person and let's say a year down the road we still have the issue, then is the answer going to be, well, then now we need two people, or, you know, like at what, you know, I'm not completely convinced that this person is going to solve the problem that we have, basically. So that's my feeling.
Thank you. Councillor Hu?
I'm going to be rambling too. So I like Assistant City Manager Nyland's analogy of customer service, because having living in Tigard for 18 years, I do believe that we do provide excellent service. But the problem is, how do you find the right department or the person to get that service? Because once I found that, I got instant response. You know, I emailed the city, found the right person, said, the no parking sign on my cul-de-sac is fading after 20 years. And I'm not kidding, the next day they came and replaced all the signs. So I think the city is providing excellent service. But the problem, as everybody stated, is how do we find that service? Because for me, it is, I mean, I'm a lawyer, I'm pretty good at research, so I can find it, but it sometimes took me a while to find it. So I'm not saying other people are not as smart or anything, but if it took me that long to find it, I can't imagine for other people who just, you know, don't have the time or don't have the language skill or the know-how, technology know-how to do that. So the problem is, how do we improve, you know, the way people find service? And I remember when I became councilor-elect, my first meeting with city manager, I think I mentioned that I really want to understand how people Tigard get their information from city. And I'm so glad that Assistant City Manager Nyland's saying that we're working on that. And hopefully, I'm not putting too much expectation in Tyler, but hopefully Tyler will solve a lot of problems. Because again, going back to being a lawyer 20 years ago when I was starting up, I share a system with another lawyer, but 20 years later, technology has improved significantly. Now I don't need an assistant. I can do everything. You know, AI and technology can help me do everything. So I have faith that we can improve our technology. So in a way to help everybody, including BIPOC or people, English is a problem, to better help them to connect the right person or department to provide them with the city's excellent service. So, and to a lot of budget committee members concerned about we still don't know what we are funding, and I do share that. And hopefully, as we maybe 3 months later, as Councilor Wolf has indicated, after we work on this research a little bit longer, maybe 3 months later, we can do a self-evaluation and say, hey, here's the problem, and maybe here's this community navigator or whatever the title is can actually do to help us. Because at this point, to be honest, I also don't know exactly what this person would do. But so yeah, that's my rambling. So and I told Steve that this if we just do the internal improvement, it's not an easy way out. I do want to hold the city, and City Manager Reimer knows I keep I'm very good about asking deadlines. So I always follow up with him. I don't let go. So if we didn't fund it, I personally will keep following up with City Manager. So this is not an easy way out. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense.
Thank you. Councilor Shaw?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Definitely value the PRAB's recommendation and their hard work, and former Councilor Newton's continued community involvement. She's just been an incredible source of mentorship, I think, for a number of us. I'm a little unclear, similar to the mayor, is what the role and responsibilities would be from just that community navigator, what problem it will solve. I do trust staff and think that they're going to do the hard work between the city manager and assistant city manager Kathy Nyland and the leadership team to review what is needed, what the gaps are internally. So I have no further questions, but I do think it's a little early to create this position. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councilor Singh?
Thank you. Yeah, I'll say, I'll be honest, I'm 100% for this position. I think it should be a priority. I think it'll break silos internally within Tigard. It'll create a team with specifically accountability. We can say we're going to do things. We can say we're going to do surveys. We can say, but when it doesn't happen, who's going to be held accountable? And I think, when we're talking about position like me, I've been a community organizer for the past decade. I've worked with immigrants, refugees, low-income communities, and I know that my position as an elected official is very different from other positions within the city. The reality is a lot of community members that look like me, who were raised in immigrant families, who are immigrants themselves, they don't know that I exist, right? And this position has the ability to create a bridge to the city for those community members who don't understand that I exist or even what role I play. So I feel like this position not only has the ability to just break silos internally, but just create accountability and work as a team. We expect police officers to play multiple roles, but we don't question their job description, right? So I feel like this position has the ability to really, Tigard has the ability to really lead in this arena, even though other cities don't have, similar roles. I think Tigard can lead, and the only question I guess I'll leave with, just for everyone to think about, is if there's ever been a recommendation that's come from the committee, from a community advisory group, has that position ever been funded at the government? So I think that's a question I'll leave, because I just want people to think that this is really coming from community. There's a community need, and we can make history here and serve those needs. So thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion that anyone would like to have on this position? Leah Voigt?
Yeah, I just wanted to do some quick comments in response to some other questions that were raised. I think the idea that one person's not going to solve the problem is absolutely accurate. Same thing, right, with our DEIB hire. Like, they're not going to solve the problem. Its entire system's work. It's not going to be solved in a year. We're talking about equity. So in that sense, I absolutely agree with that. I just don't see it as a problem. I see it as a reality. And I see the fact that, also in terms of if there's not a solution, are we just going to put more money or put more staff? And I would say that we already treat other problems like that already. There is rise in crime, so we hire more police. It's not that we don't review, evaluate, and decide, what our best practices, what are the way we're going about this, but we do put more money at problems that aren't solved. We do that across the city in many ways. And then also just a reminder that, the review board or the Public Safety Advisory Board was formed for a reason, and it was formed by a cross-section of community members, and that, it was not a unanimous pass, right? It was 9 yes, 3 no, 3 absent. And the other proposals were unanimous, but the city took the other proposals and said, yes, we value the feedback of the board, and we value that they put time and energy and consideration into these, and so we will implement them. And so I understand for any advisory council, or nothing's going to be adopted across the board. It doesn't mean they all always should, but I do think that looking at those, what did we fund? We funded things that put more resources towards the police, more police positions in the department, and that this position that is outside of that department that has funding going to a different department is not getting funded. I just think is there are different reasons for that, and I think it's a critical question to ask. Why is it happening like that?
Thank you. Kalina Plath?
So I wasn't asked to speak on this tonight, but in just hearing some of the comments, I wanted to share a little bit of my experiences. One, being a new employee with City of Tigard, I absolutely think that what our city manager has stated, that we want to be more out in the community, we want to have more in reach with different departments is there. I absolutely came to the City of Tigard over other options because of our website, because of our work with equity and what we've put out there, and just the goals that the city has. In my previous role, we had actual navigators. So I come from Salem Housing Authority, and we have navigators that were out in the community. And one of the issues that we had is when that person left our agency, we now lost all of that work with those community members. They no longer knew where they could come to. They didn't trust anyone else. It was that one person. And they would constantly come back and be like, well, where are they? They're not here anymore. Well, I don't want to talk to anyone else. And so that was really, really difficult for us when we lost people who made those great connections. That was the only person that they made that connection with. And I absolutely agree that, we want to be in the community more, we want people to be able to trust us and things like that. But I feel like when it's a single role like that, and that person does eventually move on or whatever happens, that you can be set back years with it just being on that one person. So I love the fact that we're attempting to make it holistic and everywhere, and that Lisa's mentioned they've got some community engagement department members in areas that they can be that person and be out in that community so that you don't have that one siloed person that could move or has something, and then you don't have that. And where do they go again? Because they didn't learn that they could come and speak to Cindy if they had a question, or call Kathy, or send an email to the complaint loop department. So I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate the perspective. Are there any further comments or questions? Councillor Hu?
I just want to address Leah's concern about hiring more police. I do understand that, you know, it could be a concern because recent news does, you know, expose some not great behaviors. But I just want to share my personal experience living in Tigard. Last year, I attended the Pride Parade, and I saw police escort, and I saw the chief right there in the parade, and I, you know, talking to community members. And after that morning, the very afternoon, I attended an anti-racist march at the retirement community because there was an incident. And at the end of the march, guess who was there? The police chief was there. So I saw her twice in a day, and I emailed her right away. And at that time, I haven't thought about running for city council. I just thank her, saying that her presence in the community as a gay person, as a person of color, seeing her at those two events both in one day really meant a lot to me. So I really have no problem supporting Tigard Police because our police department is different from other departments. And I just want to remind you that, you know, my experience, and I do feel as a person of color and a minority, I do feel I'm being supported by our police department. So I just want you to keep that in mind. So thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other additional questions or comments on the community navigator position? All right, well, just going around the room and sort of trying to sort of get a sense, I think, where the committee's at. I think the committee clearly acknowledges that there is a need in the community for more external outreach and building trust and connections with the community. But it sounds like there's also a general concern at this moment about the specific roles and responsibilities of a community navigator position at this particular time. Does that sound sort of accurate, just listening to the conversation? Yeah? Yeah. And I think it's important to note both. I think, you know, there is value in creating this position. It sounds like it's more of a not now than it is a hard no. And I think, you know, sort of bring it back to what is the budget committee for? We need to consider the value of our community as reflected in our budget. We also need to consider our resources, and ultimately the recommendation we would need to make is, do we want to appropriate $150,000 of city funds for this position, specifically for fiscal year 2023-2024. That's the specific question, I think, before us. It sounds like there's some concerns about moving forward for this fiscal year, but for a future fiscal year, it definitely sounds like there's a possibility. It sounds like among the council members on the committee that they want to have ongoing conversations with city management to sort of flesh out what this position could look like, how these needs could be met. That's my takeaway of where we're at. Consequently, is there a motion should we take a motion at this point? I feel like consensus is good, but sure. Yeah, totally agree. Is there I think the specific motion would be recommending that the budget be amended to add full-time position, $150,000 recurring expense. Is there a motion for this recommendation?
I will make a motion. this is Leah Voigt, to add the city navigator position into the city budget for the 23-24 fiscal year. How detailed do I need to be? Okay, I was going to say, do I need to say department? Do I need to say money? Okay.
From our standpoint, that
Cool.
suffices.
I would like to make that motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second.
Councillor Singh seconds. Is there any further discussion? All right. I think earlier I called the vote on meeting minutes, but Secretary Voigt, I probably should have asked you to call it. Should I? Apologize for my confusion. I should do it? I can do it. Okay. I apologize. I read the script earlier and I was like, was this Leah's section? I didn't. Yeah, it's all good. All right. All right. Well, the motion before the committee is to recommend that the proposed budget for fiscal year 2023-2024 be amended such that an additional full-time position is added for a community navigator role. If you are in favor, we will have a roll call vote. If you're in favor, please say yes. If you are opposed, please say no. Jake Schlack, no. Tim Cadman?
Nope.
Kelly Pement?
No.
Leah Voigt?
Yes.
Mayor Lube?
No.
Councillor Hu?
No.
Councillor Shaw?
No.
Councillor Singh?
Yes.
Councillor Wolf?
Yes.
All right, I'm checking my tallying here. 3, how many people are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, sorry. 6? What? 6, 3. All right, there are 3 yes votes, 6 no votes, so the motion is not carried. There we are. I don't know what to say after that. Yeah. So thank you all for your participation in this discussion. And I imagine that this will be an ongoing topic for the City Council and for the Budget Committee for future budget cycles. That said, the next item on the agenda is follow-ups from the April 22nd meeting. I'd like to point out on your paper copy of the meeting minutes, we have a nice list of the items that were brought up if you want to follow along. So at this point, I'll turn it over to City Manager Reimer and team to do a review of these.
Well, thanks, Chair. Appreciate it. I want to start by thanking all of you for your questions, both here as well as follow-ups that you provided us and clarity. And kindly, a bigger thank you to our team for the work that they've been doing since right after that meeting. They were starting to work on these, as you probably expect. There was a few things when we followed up that we said we need a little more time on. So I guess it depends on the committee's preference. We can walk through them at a high level. There's a lot of them. Or if there's certain ones that committee members have follow-up questions to, which may be a more efficient way, we could go that route as well, where you could just ask us for clarity or some additional information. So, Chair, whatever the committee prefers.
Sure. I think for the sake of efficiency, it'd be good to at least have an opportunity to expedite the discussion of some of them. One I would like to expedite is, I think, fourth bullet from the bottom, new application process for additional community grants to accommodate Family Justice Center and other organizations, just because that was one of the recommendations that we discussed on April 22nd.
Great, thank you for the question. We did open up a new application period last Monday, and it's closing tonight at midnight. The applications are available online, and we did reach out to make sure that everyone that was interested had the ability to apply, and we sent them a link. So that's the process, and we'll do like we have in the past. Once we have all the applications, we'll send them all around. and make sure that the committee has the opportunity to vote on the proposals.
Thank you. Since the committee is scheduled to consider approval of the full budget for next week, would this ultimately result in a supplemental budget adjustment that we would need to do, or would this be done by May 8th?
It'll be a technical adjustment.
Okay.
And we'll make sure we have the information for you.
All right. Thank you.
We'll have a list of technical adjustments and line itemed, and you'll be able to know what you're looking at and what you're voting on.
Thank you. Are there any other follow-up questions or comments on that particular item? All right. Are there any other specific items that anyone would like to discuss or expedite? Tim Cadman.
Yeah, I think one that we talked about a little bit last week, but I think probably needs a little bit more discussions around the community events, and that was item 51 on the list that we got over the weekend. And based on what I read there, it sounds like there isn't a hard, fast rule regarding for-profit and not-for-profit, but that we need to be consistent, which I agree with. We need to be consistent. Still unclear to me, the downtown Tigard events, we offered them $40,000 this year in the proposed budget, and there was a comment in there saying that we did fund them in the past, but I didn't see how much we had funded them. And unfortunately, after I was on the subcommittee, I threw away all my papers. So I don't know if somebody could clarify that.
Yes, well, I'll go ahead and look that up while we answer maybe some other questions, but I do have that information in front of me.
Okay, great. Well, that was kind of part of the beginning of it. Then I did notice that there was a list in here of the community events from the I think this was related to the downtown Tigard events. Looks like it's on page 29 of the details. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 events, totaling $90,000. And the city was supporting them with $40,000 of that over 9 events. And I don't know if anybody's got any thoughts or opinions they want to share relative to the music festival, which they're asking for $20,000. It is for one event, it is for profit, but should we take that into consideration relative to what we're doing with the downtown Tigard? What I don't know is, are they a for-profit? Are they a not-for-profit? And that just sharing my naivety there. And if they are a for-profit and we are funding them, then why would we not support them in a music festival that could also bring in a lot of folks?
Okay, so I do have a list of the applications, and it'll give me just a second. I'll look them up and let you know which ones were nonprofit. I'm pretty sure most of them are nonprofit, but before I say 100% they are, I want to verify that, and it'll just take me a second. So let me look at that, and maybe we'll answer some other questions. We can come back to that, circle back. Okay.
Sure, yes.
I believe they're all the TDA, that list, and they are a 501c3, I believe. So, yep, I believe that entire list is from the TDA, correct?
I'm hearing it from both sides,
okay.
so I'm going to take that as a yes, they are. I'll look up the numbers for you, totals.
Sure. So it sounds like we'll circle back to that in a few minutes, and yeah, just let me know when that's ready. All right. Are there any other follow-ups on the follow-up items that anyone would like to raise, or? I will refrain from asking about the pickleball courts. I know that concerned people last time. Tim Cadman.
Yes, on a different topic, the water CIP, I think it was item 45. Looks like there was a double count on the transfers in. And if I read the explanation correctly, instead of the ending reserve, it's on page 390 of our proposed budget, I think it was going to be like 6.5 million. Now it's only going to be 1.4 million. So now that we know that the ending reserve is only going to be 1.4 million, does that raise any concerns? Was there plans for that down the road that now things need to be reassessed, or was that just a technical number that needed to be adjusted and we're all good to go?
Could you please refer to the page number again?
Let's see, page 390 in the proposed budget, and it's item 45 on the question list that went out.
Yeah, so I can comment on that. So on the water CIP fund, that is a capital project fund. That fund does not need to carry a fund balance. It's an in and out for construction projects.
Yeah, and with it being an in and out for construction projects, there was a thinking based on this that there was going to be 6.5 million available for projects, and now there's only going to be 1.4 million. Is that okay? Does that impact the CIP or any other funding that may have been expecting any of those funds?
Joe, would you mind weighing in?
I'm sorry, can we repeat the question? I was on another call real quick.
The water CIP fund reserves is going to be down $4.9 million. Is that a problem?
That's a pretty loaded, is that going to be a problem question. Anytime any of our funds are going to be in the negative, it's going to create a problem down the road for the city. There's mitigation pieces that could be in play that could be put in action before we would get to that situation, and we'd have to turn to our partners in finance to help us come up with some of those alternatives that could stop us from going into that position.
To add to that, I believe the issue, and Steve Toller's on the line and he can answer if I'm incorrect, but it was just a duplication on the transfer page itself. It wasn't actually within the enterprise fund when it was coming out of the system, and I'll say, Tyler, we'll solve that because it's got some good integration in there. This is coming out of an outdated access system, to be honest, and when we ran the transfer page, somehow it duplicated that line, which is why the total transfers showed 4.9 million higher on one end than the other. It wasn't actually falling into the fund. And yes, Steve is responding to me that it was just the one-sided duplication there. So what you see here in the fund is actually correct. Only on that transfer page did somehow it populate twice.
Well, yeah, then that resolves my concern. I think we're fine. It's my takeaway.
Are there any other specific items that anyone wants to touch upon? Or even just more plugs for Tyler at this point? Tim Cadman.
Since I'm on the roll, I think this is my last one. And it's the last question on the list that went out over the weekend regarding the long-term forecast. It turns out when they ran the scenarios that a property tax increase of only 3% versus 4.5% really didn't have a huge impact on the long-term health of our reserves, which was a good surprise actually for me. But the usage significantly impacted it. So the expectation is we can only spend to 90% of our budget if we want to maintain our reserves. And if we spend to 95%, we're going to be basically running out of money in a few years. So to me, that's highly sensitive, hence my question around how the last decade or so have we been spending to 90%, 93%, 95%, because I think that really is going to swing what the long-term forecast looks like. So getting that information before by the 8th, next Monday, is I think going to be really important. The other thing that I noticed in there as well is we've got I think, 3 types of reserves that were listed in last year's plan that aren't listed this time. They're kind of lumped together, and I don't fully understand them. If somebody could help me understand this, there was a service level reserve of 8.8 million in the past, an emergency reserve of 1 million, and then a cash requirement reserve, and I think this is related to some of our funding mechanisms that we have to have. This is of 11 million. If those are all real and we have to have those and we can't spend those monies, then that means we've got to, our floor is really 20.8 million. And so knowing whether or not we do truly have a floor of 20.8 million, then the real question is, when does our reserve fall below 20.8 million? Not when does it go to 0. Is there somebody that can clarify whether or not those reserves are in fact real and those are the levels that need to be maintained over time?
Steve Tiller, I can see you on the screen for one. So, Tim, is it primarily the 3 categories you're looking for, or because they?
Yeah, whether or not there are reserves that we really can't touch under normal circumstances. Yeah, and if so, when you add them up, where is our real floor? So that when we do this long-term planning, we know, gosh, once we go below a certain level, we've got a real problem. We can't spend those monies even though it says that they're in the general fund.
I'll Steve start, and I'll
address
add
that.
what I think he
Hi,
says.
everybody.
Go ahead, Steve Tiller. Thank you.
Good to see y'all. Those are target reserve policies of the council, and the budget committee in the past has also reviewed and blessed, if you will. And so, in one, the simple answer is yes, kind of, Tim, is that when the reserves go below those levels, then you need to start creating a plan to be able to restore those reserves up to that level. So it's not like hard and fast that if you all of a sudden fall below it, boom, game over. That's not the case. Game is over when you hit 0. You don't want to get there, right? And the forecast demonstrates, subject to what you just said, and I totally agree with you, that the expenditure savings assumption needs to be realistic, right? And based on staff's the historical, usage, it does appear that that's a realistic assumption, but it's a critical component that they're going to have to watch. But ultimately, those reserves are reserve policies, and they're a cascading policy that says, okay, you first tap into this, then you tap into this, then you tap into this. Ultimately, though, I think with what it's saying here is that the city's minimum reserve, that is that yellow bar that you saw, that 25% level, that's the one that you've really got to make sure you're trying to maintain, because ultimately that deals with your liquidity of your fund to be able to address any gaps that are starting to occur. So I think that even all 3 of those scenarios, the baseline and then the 2 scenarios, scenario 1 and 2 that we painted for you, do show that the city would stay above that 25% minimum reserve level. So does that help?
I'll have Tim answer if you have any more follow-up, and I'll add a little more.
Yeah, no, that was very helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
So this is more of a moving forward thought. So a couple things is, so in one community I worked in, we ended up having the policy, but then we also established 2 areas that if you met a certain thing, then certain actions would be taken. So one was, as you approach, I'll just make up the number, as you approach 30%, right, then this would have to happen with the city council. The bottom one was if you were approaching that 15%, it was immediate actions that were going to require A, B, and C in like a 30-day period. So you had these kind of safeguards. Another one is, so that was one. The next community was similar reserve levels, but our policy was more having 42 to 44%. So that was also a AAA rated city. So rather than having the 3 tiers, we just were maintaining 42 to 44, kind of like that way instead. So not that it changed anything for today, but if you wanted to continue refining the policies in the future, maybe it's good policy conversations of different methods you can go about establishing reserve levels.
Councilor Wolf.
Thank you, Chair. And first, Tim, thank you just for your due diligence on your questions and the level of detail that you're pulling back on some really critical components. And I think my question was really answered by City Manager Reimer, and in my mind starts to think about bond rating and having the policies, but what is that minimum that really holds the standard around our bonds? So I guess I would be interested in having those conversations about how do we really be mindful of those reserves so we ensure that we're staying where we need to as we think about future plans and goals. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, as last time you talked about starting to meet quarterly or some frequency besides these 4 times, those are the type of things that you could do outside the budget cycle where you could talk policy too.
Are there any other follow-ups on the follow-up items? Is there any additional information about the downtown Tigard events?
Yes, I just looked up some information here, and in 2022, the downtown total that the city committed was $8,100, and in 2023, it was $29,500, and so then in 2024, it would be $40,000. So there's your progression, and I can send you more years back if you'd like. But that's just the last few years.
No,
quick check.
That's helpful, yeah. So there was actually a substantial increase. I wasn't on the subcommittee last year, so there must have been some rationale for it at that point, and then we continued to support it. Wondering if there's an interest in continuing to, we offered $2,000 to the music festival. Is that in line with what the Downtown Alliance is doing? Is it substantially different? I'm just trying to wrap my head around balancing out the funding.
I just want to add that we have to remember previous years, there weren't a lot of events, so there wasn't a lot of funding because of COVID. So that may explain the progression, right? Like last year was the first year we had the street fair. So we didn't have a ton of expenses for a couple of years for events.
And then we had ARPA money.
Yeah.
So we were.
Yeah, actually, I remember us cutting it during COVID because I was part of that, so that explains it. We refunded it again. Okay, and they're a not-for-profit organization as well. Okay, thank you.
Yes, Community Alliance is a nonprofit.
Okay.
Downtown Alliance.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on that point as far as proposals for community events go? All right. Well, as far as my perspective goes, I trust the judgment of the subcommittee on social services and community events, as they were the ones that reviewed all the applications in depth. And if there are any points that they would like to make at any point, I would be welcome to hearing it. That said, hearing nothing at this time, are there any new items that anyone would like to raise ahead of the meeting on May 8th? All right, and of course there's always opportunity to, if any questions arise in the next week, to email our wonderful city staff their questions. I think I sent a 4-page document at one point, so plenty of opportunities, and I hope to get another thorough spreadsheet of questions and answers. That said, hearing no other additional items, I think we've reached the conclusion of our agenda and our budget meeting for today, hearing nothing else. So I want to thank everyone for attending the budget committee. Oh, sorry. Did you? No.
Finish your thought if you don't mind. And sorry, I just put my hand up.
Yeah, no worries. I was waiting for someone to put up their, leave their sign up like that at some point, so there we go. I'd like to thank everyone for attending today. We will recess for today and resume our next scheduled meeting on Monday, May 8th at 6 p.m. And as with today, there will be food provided beforehand, so show up a few minutes early or several minutes early and, get some food. All right. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.